Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I did a video yesterday talking about partials and leverages, and the point that always comes up when you bring this up, invariably today, people will always say, but what about sticking point training? Everyone has a sticking point on a big lift, and if you train those sticking points, you'll get stronger and you'll be able to lift more weight because your sticking point won't be your weak link anymore. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this, because this is one of those interesting things that has evolved from the equipped lifting world, and it has done an extreme disservice to the rest of the training world. And I agree with Paul Carter on this one, who himself has placed extremely well in the world level in powerlifting, and he has coached a lot of championship lifters. You guys probably know him from Lift Run Bang. He makes this point that raw lifters do not have weak links in their lifts. They do not have sticking points in their lift that are performance based in the regard that you think they are, that you could just train that weak point. It actually doesn't work. Some people have tried it sometimes and they might think it worked, but trust me, it doesn't work, because that's not the way the human body works. Your strength curve is not what you think it is with a raw lift. Strength curves are totally different from equipped lifts. When you're dealing with big compound exercises with a barbell, almost always the hardest part of the exercise is the bottom, and the exercise becomes easier as you go up. In 95% of big barbell movements, there are some exceptions out there with things, some body weight type stuff, but big barbell movements, that's always the case. Squat, bench, and deadlift, that is the case. Always the case on those, in any variation of those exercises. I don't care what variation it is, that is true all the way across the board. The weight is easier to lift as you go up. It requires less force every inch that you go up to keep that weight moving, or to actually move it even from a dead stop. It's easier. It's easier. It requires less force. People get this idea of sticking points because you get strength curves that are dramatically different from equipped lifting. A bench shirt can sometimes add 200 pounds to what you can lift out of the bottom. A squat suit can do the same thing. It's changing the strength curve the other direction, and accordingly, that's why so many people who wear these things train with accommodating resistance, with bands, chains, things like that. That's one reason that so many people work on sticking points with these, because you can develop sticking points because you're dealing with a totally different curve. Now, obviously, when you get into certain isolation movements with different pulls towards gravity, curls and things, this can be a little different. But when you're dealing with a squat, bench, or a deadlift, it is always true. And as Paul Carter would always tell people, you don't need to get stronger in your sticking point, you need to get stronger. The reason you can't lock 300 pounds on the bench press is because you are not strong enough to lock 300 pounds on the bench press. And no amount of weak point training, if you don't get stronger out of the bottom, is ever going to allow you to get that 300-pound bench press that keeps sticking what you're perceiving near the lockout. It's usually sticking 4 or 5 inches off your chest, and that's because you are simply not strong enough to lift it. And what I mean is, because it's higher than your 1 rep max, the force that you have to generate to get the weight started at the hardest part, the bottom, saps all of your energy, and it exhausts all of your upper threshold fibers to the point to where you don't have any more of them left to recruit to even continue to accelerate the weight, and it stops because you had nothing left after getting it started. If you got stronger out of the bottom, you would lock it easier. And that's the thing that he's noted over and over and over. When he has lifters who are stuck on a max, who haven't been doing enough pause work, they do pause work. If he has a lifter who's stuck at a certain deadlift, try doing deficit deadlifts, and then when they go back, they can suddenly add 5 or 10 pounds to their deadlift. Sometimes 10 pounds more than what they stuck with before. And it's because you don't have those sticking points that you think that you have. They don't actually exist. It's because you're not able to lift fast enough out of the bottom. You've exhausted everything that you have getting a weight started that you aren't capable of lifting. You exhausted those muscle fibers. Your muscle fibers in your chest don't care at what point in the lift you're at. And you need to remember, it gets easier as you go up when you're fresh, when you haven't exhausted everything that you have in the first 2 inches of the lift. And that's the point. You didn't have enough strength to get it accelerated out of the bottom quick enough to lock it because you used everything up. The weight was too heavy for you to lift. And if you want proof of this, all you guys out there who talk about some of this weak point training, go take these weak points you guys talk about. Your bench press, A lot of you guys who have a max bench of 275, go put 315 on the bar and do a 3-board press. Maybe you think that your weak point, the reason you get 275 and you can't lock 280 or 285 is because you can't do the lockout. Well, go put 315 on the bar and do a 3-board press or whatever press puts you to that point where you think you're sticking, and do it fresh. Not after attempting a max. And then watch how many reps that you can do with 40 pounds heavier than your 1-rep max. You're already stronger in that position. And that's the thing that people don't grasp when they talk about this sticking point training. They honestly think that that's their sticking point and they need to get stronger there. Well, you're already stronger there. You're already stronger in that sticking point. What good is training it going to do other than using up recovery and using up training ability that's purely working that range of the motion instead of the part where you really need more strength? The bottom, where you're so exhausted that you can't recruit any more muscle fibers after it's already 2 inches up, because actually once it's in motion it should be even easier. It should be even easier to lift once you get it in motion versus the dead stop from the pen press or the rack lockouts or whatever it is you're happening to do. Should be easier. It's already in motion. But it's not on your max, and that's because you've exhausted the upper threshold fibers already. You need to get stronger. And everyone has a weak point in their strength, but that doesn't mean that if they suddenly are able to lift 5 more pounds through with their perceived slowdown point is in the exercise, that doesn't mean their max is going to go up by 5 pounds. Because they're still not getting stronger through the entire exercise. And it is about how many muscle fibers do you have left to continue to accelerate the weight. If you've exhausted everything you have and you don't have anything left because you're not strong enough out of the bottom or through the whole range of motion, then that's your problem. It's not like you use different fibers in the chest at every couple inches in there. You actually don't. Different muscles might take more priority, but you know what? That doesn't mean that you need to do partials to fix that. And again, plenty of top coaches out there for raw lifters totally throw this out the window. They don't do this at all, and they're still putting people into world level championships. All right, there are people going to worlds under coaches who don't have their raw lifters do any of this stuff. They have them work on paused work. They have them work on variations of the lift to build up different weak muscles. Because you might have weak muscles that are in there. You might have a weak muscle. And you know what? If you think that your pecs are the weak link on your bench press, then by all means, add some meat to your pecs, because really the only 2 things that are going to affect strength are motor fiber, or motor unit learning, which is going to affect muscle fiber recruitment, and the size of the muscle fibers. That's really going to be what determines your strength. That's what's going to determine how much you've progressed, if at all, on an exercise. So if you feel that your pecs are limiting you on your bench press, then by all means do some extra work for your chest. Do a variation. Do a new exercise. Do some weighted dips. Do some incline dumbbell bench presses. No problem. If you think on your deadlift that your thoracic erectors are your limiting factor, then do some front squats. It'll help you, because you're only going to be as strong as your weakest link. And if you have a muscle in the kinetic chain that is too weak, yeah, hypertrophying and thickening up that muscle will help you get stronger at that lift. No doubt about it. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you feel that your quads need to get bigger, then do some extra quad work if you think it's going to help your squat. If you think that's your limiting factor on your squat, that that's your weak link. But the thing is, these muscles may not be your weak link. And you know what? Sometimes variations of exercises help, because sometimes we need to be able to move through different bar paths, particularly to avoid injury. Sometimes it might not even make you stronger, but it can help with injury prevention. But yeah, there are certain exercises that always carry over to your other lifts. Getting stronger on your overhead press will almost always increase your bench press a little bit. Getting stronger on the front squat will oftentimes increase your deadlift. So there's nothing wrong with doing some accessory work to help you work around weak muscles. Muscles that need more development on an exercise. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That actually is very effective. But thinking that you have sticking points, no, you don't have sticking points because you're weak at that part of the exercise. You have a sticking point because you're using everything that you have, getting the weight started at the hardest part, and you don't have anything left. You need to get stronger overall. You are not strong enough to lift that weight. It's that simple. The only other benefit you might see from some of this partial work is people will notice something. when you start doing partials, you will naturally gravitate towards the easiest bar path that will let you lift the most weight. Meaning if you get on a board press, you will find the bar path at the top that feels the lightest with a heavier weight than you've ever maxed on usually because it's easier. Maybe you need to learn to press to that path every time. Same thing on the deadlift. You know, guys will do these above the knee rack pulls and they can lift 100 pounds more than their normal lift, and that's an above the knee rack pull. These guys I've seen lately who are coming in saying they're lifting double. You're not doing an above the knee rack pull, you're doing a 2-inch rack pull. All right, you're doing a 3-inch rack pull. That is not an above the knee rack pull. There is no way in hell on a proper above the knee rack pull that you guys are adding 300 pounds over your max. That's not how it works. You guys are doing a lot smaller of a motion than just the above the knee. Again, I've seen enough top power lifters and seen their strength ratios on these exercises when they do mess with these that you guys are not doing the exercise correctly. You're going to hurt yourselves. You're going to hurt yourselves if you're honestly getting 300 pounds out of an above the knee rack pull. You're going to hurt yourselves. You need to cut that crap out. But same thing on the rack pull. You'll notice you can put yourself in a leverage to where you're stronger. Why don't you find that leverage, and on your way up, as soon as you clear the knee on the deadlift, find that same bar path. That is the one benefit you guys can get from these heavy partials, is finding the best anatomical position on your bar path, because that will sometimes help you drift through an easier spot to hit big numbers on those lifts. But the thing is, you are just getting a leverage advantage by doing that. Don't assume you're necessarily going to get the best hypertrophy by doing that. You're just finding a bar path that makes the movement easiest, which will let you lift more weight. But partials are useful for doing that. As a learning tool exclusively, but as a strength building tool, I think they're mediocre at best. And they're certainly no better than doing traditional full range of motion. They don't have one benefit over it. And they certainly don't fix your sticking points. And there are plenty of top coaches of raw lifters out there who have trained champions who will tell you the same thing. They don't have any of their champions trained that way. There are coaches who do, but there are a whole hell of a lot who don't, and they're just as effective at the world level. It's just not necessary. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.